Hello and welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, joined by my co-host, Matt Doraldi.
What's going on, guys?
I don't know why I slipped over my words so badly there, but we're just going to keep rolling with that. So we're coming at you today with another rookie mock draft. So we picked a new real NFL mock draft done by Tankathon, and we're going to have landing spots here that we're going to talk about. A lot of new landing spots. So this draft is going to look very different from the first one we did, right? So we're going to talk about some of those landing spots with the players themselves. If you're new here, also hit that subscribe button. It helps us a lot. All right, without further ado, let's get into the first round of the mock draft here. So we're going to be doing 2 rounds of the rookies. And the first overall pick is just going to be so obvious and so consistent. It's Ashton Jeanty. And in this mock, he went 12th overall to the Cowboys. That's obviously the ideal landing spot, in my opinion. I think if he goes there, he's going to be a first-round pick. He's probably going to be a top 5 running back in redraft leagues. He's going to be the first pick, obviously, in your rookie mocks. But this is going to be borderline generational talent, right? I mean, we say that a lot, but I really think he's in the same mold as Bijan Robinson. Going on to pick 2, we've got Tet McMillan.
Yeah, so I remember the first time I watched Tet McMillan play, I was watching a Servette game with my dad. Tet was safety at the time, and I watched 2 plays. He didn't touch the ball once. And I looked at my dad and I said, that is the best athlete on the field. I don't know who this guy is, but just the way he moves is completely different. And of course, he was one of the top prospects. Recruiting that year, he made a flip from Oregon to Arizona to play with his high school quarterback. His quarterback really dropped off his junior year, but Tet somehow maintained pretty similar numbers, which was very impressive. And I will say with the Carolina Panthers, I do like this landing spot in the sense that we saw how much better Bryce Young got at the end of the year after the benching. You know, they do have a lot of mouths to feed in a sense, but I think him coming in is like the true alpha. He can definitely learn from Thielen, who's on the last year of his deal. I really like Leggett, but I don't think, he's going to be a prototypical number 1. They've got Sanders, they've got Coker, but I think he will truly be the one. And if Bryce continues to improve, I like him a lot for fantasy.
Going on to number 3, I've got Luther Burden here. If he gets the round 1 capital and the 17th overall pick, which is where he went in this mock, and to the Bengals, right? I assume if they're going to invest round 1 capital, that T. Higgins is going to leave in free agency, and that opens a monster role for him as the over the middle of the field, mid-range, short-range targets. I really think this would be an awesome landing spot. I can't really imagine a better landing spot than this for him if T. Higgins does leave. I just really think he's a special athlete. He's very shifty. They're going to figure out ways to manufacture touches for him. And I would just be very, very excited here. We obviously had Hampton over him in the first draft because he went to the Cowboys. But in this situation, I think I'd rather have Burden. Moving on to 104, alluded to it here. We've got Omarion Hampton.
Yeah, so I love this landing spot for Hampton. I mean, we saw last year how much of a mess the Raiders running game was. I think, Zamir White, Madison, all these guys, just completely awful. And what I like about Hampton is he's kind of got it all. So he really profiles as what could be a workhorse 3-down back. And they desperately need it. And we're going to see a lot of changes with the Raiders, with the new regime coming in. Definitely a change at quarterback. Maybe not immediately. Maybe O'Connell starts the year, but I think O'Connell's decent enough that, he can keep the offense moving. So for Hampton, this is another really good spot.
Moving on to 105 is Kaleb Johnson, 2nd round, 19th pick to the Denver Broncos. I think for Kaleb, this is a great landing spot. If Sean Payton decides to go in on 2nd round capital on a player like this who can be a 3-down back, who is a monster of a human, 6 foot, 225, I just really think that they can clean house in the backfield. They give all of the work to him from day 1 and that he could be off to the races. Now, I know there's a little bit of concern with his athleticism. There's a little bit of concern with his top-end speed, but I do think he's powerful through the line of scrimmage, and he's got enough wiggle in the open field to break longer runs. Now, is he going to be your 60-yard touchdown scorer? No, he's not. That's not really in his skill set, but I think he could be a very effective runner through the whole 10, 15, 20-yard runs. I think are all within his skill set and capability, and so I really like this landing spot, and I love the player. Moving on to 106, we've got Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, this is tough, right? Because in Superflex, like there's a very high likelihood that you're going to need a quarterback, and this might be lower than a lot of mocks have him. And I would say, like, if you're going to take Shedeur, take him because you really truly believe in the player, not just because of need, things like that. I understand, like, there's a lot of people that really like him. I understand there's a lot of people that don't really like him. I'm kind of apprehensive, which is totally fine. But just know, like, commit to him if that's what you believe. And I guess one of my worries with Colorado is, their schedule was not very tough at all. They've only played 2 ranked teams this last year. Obviously, they lost to BYU in that bowl game. And then I think he's maybe beaten 1 ranked team throughout his career. So I'm just a little bit nervous of how he's going to, do against NFL competition. But I think he can be fine. Like, we've seen flashes of him being very good. I see a lot of Brock Purdy in him, and I think that's interesting because Purdy obviously fell very late in the draft, but just how they were very good, solid college quarterbacks that you just weren't 100% sure if they had enough tools to make it to the next level, but we'll see.
Moving on to 107, we've got his college teammate, Travis Hunter. He goes round 1, pick 3 to the Giants, and obviously this depends a lot on him playing wide receiver. So I've seen in a lot of these mocks, he's starting to slip very, very far down the board as people in the industry get excited about other players and as his situation continues to be up in the air. But obviously, if he plays receiver, he's going to move way up. I mean, he's probably going to be 2nd overall, 3rd overall if we do get word that he's going to play as a receiver. So with the Giants, they obviously have issues at quarterback. The situation there has to get solved, and we'll talk about quarterback in the 2nd round, I'm sure. So, overall here, though, he's going to play behind Neighbors at receiver. I think that takes a lot of pressure off him as a rookie. I think if they do have a serviceable quarterback, I would love if Kirk Cousins would go there because we've seen Cousins maintain 2 receivers. We saw him do it in Minnesota, and we saw him do it for most of the season in Atlanta last year. Like, I really think that would be a great landing spot for him if they do get Hunter and they have those 2 weapons. But overall, very solid player at the catch point. Nobody's better than him. And so, again, this is 100% dependent on if he's going to play wide receiver. Going down to 108, we have Cam Ward. I know, your favorite player of the draft.
Sticking me with 2 quarterbacks that I don't necessarily like. But I will say with the Browns, like, they have good playmakers. They have Judy, they have Tillman, they have Njoku. And with Ward, like, I wouldn't categorize him like as much of a runner as maybe people think that he is or want him to be. I think he's an extremely good scramble and he puts up yards that way. And we've talked about this before. He's definitely a gamer. He's going to bring a strong mental mindset to that role. And I get it, man. Like, the Browns need a quarterback. So in Superflex too, like, you might need one as well. But again, have my guard up a little bit.
In these mocks and in these drafts, it's just going to be really hard to ignore the draft capital. Like, if he goes 2nd overall and you're in a Superflex league, like, they're committing to him, especially if the Browns can get out from under Deshaun Watson's contract. There's issues there, but this is somebody that has the tools, right? I mean, he just needs to learn how to stay a little calmer in the pocket, not bail on plays so quickly, process better. But, like, those are things that are difficult, I feel like, to overcome. But if he's able to with good coaching, again, with the Browns, is he going to get that? I don't know. So there's just a lot of question marks here with Kevin Ward. But, the draft capital and the position scarcity in Superflex leagues drives this. Now, 109, we've got Egbuka. And again, we had him down in the 2nd round in our first one. But in this one, he got 1st-round capital, and he went to the Steelers. This is just an awesome landing spot. If it is Justin Fields, I think, we've seen him support DJ Moore. And so, there's the situation with Pickens is a little bit up in the air right now in terms of if they're going to bring him back or if they're going to let him walk after next year. But Egbuka, I do think, is somebody that can be a security blanket, somebody that is, very talented route runner already. So I think he can come in and pull targets at a high rate in the NFL. And so if he does go to the Steelers, I'm very excited about this landing spot. I actually did hear, too, that he's the all-time leading receiver at Ohio State, which is insane, right? He's never been the number one.
Never been the one. Yep.
Yeah. He's never been the number one there, but he's just been consistent. And so I do really like the player. I think the landing spot is awesome. And I wouldn't I wouldn't blame you even if you wanted to push him up over the quarterbacks, honestly, and over Hunter, where there's a question mark here. I wouldn't have any problem taking him 6.
And I think this fits in really well with the Steelers too, because he's such a good run blocker. He's such a team player. Like, he does everything right. Like, again, Amon-Ra St. Brown vibes from him. And I think that just fits the Steelers mold.
Yeah, I mean, I saw somebody compare him to JSN too. And we saw JSN even get off to a slow start in his first year because he was buried on the depth chart. If Egbuka goes to the Steelers, he is not going to be buried on the depth chart.
Yeah.
They've been looking for a receiver. This is the perfect fit for what they've been trying to acquire. And so I don't know. I admit I'm over the moon. If this happens, I'm going to be way more in on this one too.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. Going down to 10, we've got Quinshon Judkins. So this is a 3rd round draft capital at pick 13, but the Patriots landing spot's pretty nice. So what do you think on Judkins?
Yeah, I like this one a lot. And the Patriots were another team that really struggled to run the ball. Obviously, their offensive line is a mess. I think the offensive line is going to be a huge priority for this offseason, protecting Drake May. And, we know Ramondre Stevenson, he is what it is. He is solid. He's not a burner, but he struggled mightily with fumbles last year. Like, they benched him for, what the heck is his name? The guy who fumbles just as much.
Antonio Gibson.
Antonio Gibson. Like, that's how you know you have a fumbling problem, when you get benched for Antonio Gibson.
For the worst. For the only player that has a higher fumble rate than you.
Yeah.
In the league.
So I really like Judkins here. It's interesting. The knock I've kind of heard on him is he just was never as electric as he was his freshman year at Ole Miss. But I think having such a strong into the college football playoffs, I think he scored 4 touchdowns over the last 2 games. Like, I think that'll help his stock quite a bit. And I would imagine he's a guy that's going to test pretty well. So another really good landing spot.
Yeah, and I heard him start getting compared to Alvin Kamara. I heard him start getting some hype as a top 25 overall pick. So, the fact that he's going in the 3rd round here, I think is something that's going to change in the pre-draft process. Going down to pick 111, we've got Colston Loveland, round 1, pick 20 to the Broncos. So we got the Broncos kind of fixing their offense here, right? They got Kaleb in round 2. They got Loveland in round 1. And I love the Loveland pick, obviously. Tight end makes it a little bit harder to pick him, so the Broncos getting a 1st-round receiver, I might push them up even higher. But obviously, they need the position. And I do think with Bo Nix stabilizing their offense now from the quarterback position, that Loveland can step in and he can pull, 90 targets as a rookie. And, he's not really an inline blocker. He is more of a move tight end. And so I think that'll only help him in an offense that needs playmakers, right? They have Sutton, but on the outside, they really don't have that much else. So I do think Loveland coming in would be the number 2 right from day 1 in the offense, assuming they don't add anybody in free agency. And I really like that from Loveland.
Yeah, I mean, tight end's been a black hole for the last 2 years under Peyton, and that drives him crazy. So I think this would be a really good fit.
Yeah, I mean, we saw how successful Jimmy Graham was as a move tight end in his offense. So they get somebody as talented as Loveland. Not saying he's going to be Jimmy Graham. Okay, Jimmy Graham was unbelievably good, but it is somebody that can be productive, and we know the position can be productive in the offense. Going down to 112, we've got Matthew Golden, round 3, pick 7. I think he's a relatively new name because I don't know that anybody expected him to declare. He hadn't declared when we did our last draft, so he wasn't even in our 2-round mock previously. But obviously, I love him, and I put him up in the 1st round. What do you think on Golden?
Yeah, that was a nice surprise for this class as a whole for him to come out. But I think with the Saints, I think you could be looking at a pretty decent landing spot. Like with Shaheed, we don't know when he's going to come back, how healthy he's going to be when he comes back. Olave is obviously great, but I think, Golden can pretty quickly assert himself as the number 2 in this offense for Derek Carr. And I know people love to hate on Derek Carr, myself included, but he can sling the rock. So I think this is a good. And
I just love the player too. I think this is, again, similar to Judkins. I think this is another guy that we're going to see improve his draft stock over the draft process. I think when we get into April, he's going to start being talked about in the top 5 receivers. I think he's going to start being talked about as possibly an early 2nd-round pick, similar to how Ladd McConkey was. I mean, when McConkey came out, I know he had a little bit more pedigree just because the Georgia connection, and he was so productive. But I do think he improved his draft stock to the point where there wasn't any doubt that he was going to go in the early 2nd round, possibly even in the 1st round. I expect a similar arc with Matthew Golden here. Going on to 2.1. So getting into the second round now. So Tyler Warren, though, going round 1, pick 14. Obviously, the capital is unbelievably high, but the Colts landing spot is just so brutal for all weapons, right? They have Jonathan Taylor in the backfield, and all the pass catchers have to deal with Anthony Richardson's inaccuracy. So maybe Warren can overcome that. He did just have over 100 targets in the college football season. So he is, in my opinion, the best tight end in this class, but the landing spot just holds me back.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at like the Colts on a sheet of paper, their offense, you're like, oh, what's the one missing thing? Oh, it's tight end. Like Mo Alley Cox is 31. I think he's a free agent. They've got another guy who doesn't really do a whole lot either. But then, I don't know. I just can't see him getting that many targets. There's just so many mouths to feed. And where Richardson struggles is short and intermediate. So this would be definitely a buzzkill for me.
Yeah. And there obviously is the chance where he just comes in and is like way better than everybody else that they have on the depth chart. Like that would not shock me entirely.
But you can make that argument about everyone, right? Like you could say Pittman can take a step back up. We know Downs is a really good player. A.D. Mitchell was like this like CeeDee Lamb type level prospect. Obviously he had some other issues that he was dealing with, but like, I don't know. It's just tough.
I know. It's just a bad situation.
Yeah.
Going to 202, we've got Jalen Milroe. So do you want to talk about another quarterback?
You're giving me all the quarterbacks. Jesus.
It's almost like I did that on purpose, right?
Oh my gosh. So Milroe just took a massive step back this year. Unfortunately, his touchdown interception ratio in 2023 was 23-6. This year it was 16-11. He also takes an absurd amount of sacks. Like I feel like as much as I watched Alabama this year, he was getting sacked a ton. And I looked at the stats and it was half as much as he had been sacked the season before. Season before he was like in the 40s, which is just a little bit scary. But from a fantasy perspective, like we know that his ability comes on the ground. And I can see making a case to move this guy up quite a bit higher just with that upside. And I understand, why teams that need quarterbacks in real life football would take a shot on this guy. Like his tools are insane. You say as a coach, like, hey, it's on me to mold this guy, but I've seen a lot of reckless play and I've seen a lot of like terrible games. Now we saw how great he played against Georgia, one of the most beautiful plays of the season to Ryan Williams to ice that game. So we know it's in there. It's just there's a lot of not so pretty stuff too.
Yeah, and the Giants landing spot I think is interesting because if they do draft Travis Hunter like they did in this mock, and they got Malik Neighbors there, he's got the weapons, like maybe even the best wide receiver. Top 5 wide receiver combo this does happen. So I think it would be interesting to see if he's able to those guys better. Those guys make him better. Actually, is right away, and then he can come from there. So this is interesting. It's interesting draft too because I think there's also a chance that through the pre-draft process that he just bottoms out. He's not showing the ability to process very well. It's more tape study comes out on him, and it limits what coaches and scouts think he can do. We'll see where he ends up getting drafted. Going to the 203, we got Trey Harris. I love the landing spot, right? Second round to the Chargers. If they need another receiver, so if they do wait until the second round to get one, which is kind of what I think they're going to do, right? If Harbaugh kind of stays true to who he is and what he wants to do, they'll get an interior lineman later in the first round. Which is a huge need for them in terms of run blocking and pass protection. Trey Harris is an excellent option, I think, in the second round. He's a big-bodied receiver. He's been very productive. And like we mentioned before, the grades on him are very high. I mean, again, I don't see a lot of crisp route running or shiftiness. He does have size, though. I don't think he's got too much top-end speed. We'll see what he runs the 40 at. But as just a solid, productive player, I think he's a great fit for the Chargers and for Herbert.
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw this going to the Chargers, I was like cautiously optimistic. My worry with Harris is that, like I said before, I do see a lot of like George Pickens light in him, but he still kind of has some of those bonehead moments where he'll have those easy drops too, like we see with Pickens. And the one thing Chargers don't need are more guys dropping the football. So I get it, and I understand the measurables are there, and I think in the second round, from a team perspective, it makes a lot of sense.
Moving on to 204, we have Ayomanor, and he gets the landing spot that we were kind of coveting in that first draft to the Commanders with Jaden Daniels. So He's also another big-bodied wide receiver out of Stanford, and it's kind of similar to Jaden Higgins in that fact. But if he gets the landing spot, he's going to go ahead of Jaden Higgins in a lot of the mock drafts. So, end of the second round here, I think he's got an opportunity to be really productive. I think he's maybe a little bit better route runner than Trey Harris, but I think he's also slower than Trey Harris. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see which one of those two ends up getting drafted earlier in the NFL draft.
I mean, with Washington, they're obviously in the market for a wide receiver, whether they address that in free agency with either Higgins or Tyreek Hill via trade. I think they'll spend first or second round draft capital. And I really like Ayomanor. Like he's growing on me like quite a bit. Like he's big, he's physical, he's a great run blocker, he's very smart. And you mentioned speed, like his long speed, his track speed in high school, he ran a 10.76 100 meters. So maybe his 40 is not going to be as good. And you kind of see that in some plays, but I don't know, man, like that top end speed is really solid. And, one of the things from a couple years ago, they were playing against Colorado and they were down 29-0. And they just, Stanford decided to run their whole offense through Ayomanor and they ended up winning in overtime. And he had 13 catches for 294 yards and 3 touchdowns. One of those was he burned Travis Hunter. The other one was he posterized him. The other one, he took a 95-yard slant to the house. So like, this guy is good. And I can see him rising a little bit more as long as his, medicals check out. He's had some major knee issues in the past. But if he looks good, man, I think this would be a really good fit for any team.
Yeah. I like him as a player quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'm just my 6th wide receiver. I have the chunker ahead of him, in this month,
yeah.
just because the homer in me and the wanting to push him up and
That's
other
fair.
people thinking better of Trey Harris than I do necessarily. I have Trey Harris down at wide receiver 8 in the class as of right now. But yeah, so I again, I'm not hating on the player. I love the player. I just think it's going to be interesting to see which one of these two goes earlier. And I think the landing spot is going to determine a lot in terms of who gets picked first in these rookie mocks. Going on to 205, we've got Travion Henderson. So if you've been listening, you're probably thinking, where's Henderson? Where's Henderson? What the heck is going on here? Why haven't they said Henderson's name yet? Or I'm all in on Henderson. I have him as my running back 2 in the class. But look at the landing spot. It's the Colts, right? So he's going to be buried behind Jonathan Taylor. The chances that he ever gets out from behind Jonathan Taylor are pretty low. And if he gets third-round capital instead of second-round capital, again, I don't know that matters a ton. But, so maybe he's the pass catching back. Maybe he gets 5 to 8 carries a game behind Taylor. But unless there's an injury to Taylor, I just don't think he's going to carry very much fantasy value if he goes there. So obviously, if he's the lead dog, he was picked to the Patriots in our last mock, and we had him at like 8 overall within this draft. But, middle of the second round is kind of where I'd take a shot on him because I do like the skills.
This one was a bummer to see, obviously, but I think if the Colts come out and they do draft this guy and they say, we envision our backfield as a David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs type backfield, because I see a little bit of Gibbs in Henderson, man. Like he's a complete flyer. I know he's a little bit wider body, but I think you can give JT some breaks and you can really utilize both those guys running alongside Anthony Richardson. So that's like the peak best case scenario. Now, would that happen? Probably not. It's probably more of a, like you said, lower touch guy, but I can see it from a team perspective and, similar to Tyler Warren too. Like I can see it from a team perspective, but Colts just have so many more issues on defense that I'm like, yeah. So anyways,
you got so many weapons on offense. Can you please spend some picks on defense? Like, my gosh. Yeah. Keep the games close. You got a running quarterback. Just use him. I don't know. I don't think that this is a good landing spot at all. I wouldn't be looking to invest in a running back if I was the Colts. But, I don't know. And the thing with Montgomery and Gibbs, like that's a decent comp, but like Gibbs is the better running back than Montgomery. And that's not really debatable.
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor is much better than Travion Henderson. He's a better prospect. He's been successful at the NFL level. Obviously, he's dealt with some injuries the last couple of years, so maybe they do want to invest in capital at the position, but I can't imagine that would end up being the split.
Yeah, I just think there's other guys that you can take later and address other needs, but
right.
Who knows?
That's where I'm at, right? Just get a Dylan Sampson in the next round, right? Yeah. Get any of these guys. Get Woody Marks in the 4th. Like there are so many other ways that they can address the position without going here in the third round. But again, we'll see where Henderson ends up falling. And if it is the Colts, that's going to be very disappointing. Going down to 206, mentioned it a little bit with the Loveland commentary, but Jaden Higgins going to the Broncos. So I mentioned that Loveland could step in and be the number 2 option right away. But if they do draft Jaden Higgins, that might not be the case, right? Higgins is a player that I really like. And if he gets the third round capital, I think that they're going to plan to use him in a pretty major way right off the bat. So I know they have Marvin Mims, who played better at the end of the year, kind of playing on the other side of Cortland Sutton, but I think Higgins would kind of take over that role if they do decide to draft him with this capital, and I think Mims would still be in on 3 or 4 wide receiver sets, going deep, that kind of thing. But Higgins is somebody that I think if the Broncos do draft, that they could potentially have their new number 1 if Sutton does move on at any point in the future.
Yeah, and unlike, the Colts in this mock draft, like these are all very, very realistic scenarios for the Broncos, because the Broncos already have a good defense, right? And these address very big areas of need with very good players. And, we talked about how I liked Higgins, like doesn't drop the ball a ton, team player, big guy, kind of was that 0-star recruit, earns everything. So I think, like you mentioned, he's in a really good spot. And so with Sutton, I forget if he's got 1 or 2 years left, but he's definitely getting on the older side. So I think this makes a lot of sense.
Going down to 207, we've got Isaiah Bond. So, second round to the Lions. I just think this is an interesting landing spot because where is he going to play?
I don't like this at all.
Yeah. I don't think the Lions are going to invest a second round pick in a receiver. Personally, they just signed Ayomanor St. Brown. Williams is still on his rookie deal, but I mean, if they do, this is somebody that can absolutely fly. He kind of took over that Xavier Worthy role. And so, I understand the capital, but again, I don't know that the landing spot makes all that much sense. It would be great to have him with a strong-armed quarterback. And that's not exactly what Goff is, but, I don't know. We'll see on the landing spot. The player, though, if we want to just talk about Bond, a little bit smaller, but he is extremely fast. I think he's going to run in the 2.4s at the 2.4s. That would be insane. In the 4.2s at the combine. So I think that could push him up to the early second round, possibly even into the first round, like we saw with Worthy, right? That was something where we didn't necessarily think he was going to make it all the way up, but the Chiefs obviously love speed for Patrick Mahomes. So, if somebody at the end of the first round wants to take a chance on the speedster, I think we could see him in a better situation other than the Lions.
It's weird because I was like a huge Isaiah Bond guy at Alabama. Like I was like, if he goes to the Chargers, I'm going to get a Bond jersey right away. And then he just sort of like fell out of favor with me at Texas. I don't know if it was just the uniform change. I didn't like it.
Probably.
I don't know because I like Texas more than I like Alabama. I mean, I dislike both teams, but like I've got my guard up again or a little bit with him. But I think, like we see with Worthy, once they get to the combine and they flash that speed, it's too good to pass up. But yeah, I don't like to the Lions here.
All right, moving on to 208. We've got Harold Fannin Jr. going in the second round to the Eagles. So the landing spot with Dallas Goedert there isn't perfect, but if the Eagles invest second round capital here, I am going to be all in. I just feel like he's very athletic, very fast. He was productive even at Bowling Green. And I think that he is somebody that will grow into a more prominent role within this offense. So I'm very in on Fannin Jr. I would much prefer that they take a tight end than a wide receiver. I've seen wide receivers get mocked to them a little bit too, which I think is interesting. Maybe some commentary on AJ Brown there, but I'm all in on Harold Fannin if he goes to the Eagles.
Yeah, and Goddard's only got a year left on his deal anyway, and so we've seen how he is in this offense. So I actually really like this landing spot. Just might have to be a little patient for the first year.
Yeah, exactly, and I think it could pay off big time, maybe even in the second half of the year, right? Kind of like we saw with McBride. But if you draft him, be patient. I do think he's going to be worth it. This could be a decent opportunity for a taxi squad guy. If you do pick him, I think the talent's there, but you throw him into your taxi squad and you prepare to have him for the 2026 season. I think that could be a decent way to work.
Yeah, if you're using like Evan Ingram or someone like that you can use this upcoming year, and then you can hold on to him. Same with like a Ben Sinnott from last year.
Yeah,
that's a good call out.
Yeah. So I like him. Keep him on your boards. And I know a lot of people, he doesn't show up in the second round of a lot of the stuff that I see, but I'm going to keep harping on him because I really think as a pass catcher, he's a very, very good talent. I think he's going to, I mean, they already put him in the second round, so I'm not sure how much his capital can increase, but I think it's overall, he's a really good player. 209, we've got Jalen Royals. This is somebody that we didn't talk about in last draft, but he did get early third round capital and went to the Patriots, who need a receiver. So the Patriots waited a couple rounds in this mock to address the position, and they went with Royals, somebody that I feel like personally is one of the most polarizing receivers within the community right now. Some people absolutely love him, and some people just don't see it. So what do you think on Royals?
I like him. I like watching him. And then I'll turn on like analysis and they're like crapping on him. So maybe I have to like watch him again. But I think with the Patriots, it's like the number one receiver is up for grabs on this team. And I don't think Royals profiles as a number one. I think he can be an okay 2 or a very good 3. But at this point right now, it's like, Booty's probably going to step up, but then behind that, Polk is awful. Like, we know what Pop Douglas is. So I think the opportunity's there. So I could see, pushing him up even higher if he does land there.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting analysis on him because he was so productive. I mean, you go and look at his games this year. Yeah. He only played in 7 games because he got hurt. And it was just like, oh my God, is there any game where he's not going to go for 150?
Yeah.
And so it's like he has all the tools. He seems to be a pretty decent route runner, but a lot of the analysis and film study I watch on him is that his routes, specifically in the intermediate part of the field, are not very crisp. So it's like he gets all of his production down the field, and he's not like a crazy burner or anything, or close to the line of scrimmage where he'll beat somebody on a slant. So the short and the long targets are where he got a lot of his production. And they're saying that, or what the people that don't like him are saying is that if he's not able to develop a little bit better route tree in the middle of the field, that he's going to struggle to be productive. So it's interesting commentary, but I like Royals, and I think, the production kind of speaks for itself. He was so good. Go look at his game. It's like, oh my God, who is this guy? Moving on to 210, we've got Quinn Ewers, you and my favorite player ever, right? But, third round capital to the Raiders. And if he goes to the Raiders, he's probably going to start. I would guess that he would beat out Aiden O'Connell now. Maybe not, but the opportunity is definitely there with the Raiders. They need a quarterback, and if they pick him in the third round, he's going to get that shot at least this year, maybe next, so maybe he kind of fizzles out. But if he ends up playing better than we expect, he's going to be the starter for the Raiders for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and it means Tom Brady would have been in on him, so I'll trust his eye. But yeah, I've soured on Ewers, as many of us have.
I kind of think he's going to get a Rattler arc in his draft process, right? Where Spencer Rattler was like a big time high school recruit, didn't work out a ton in college, then kind of flashed a little bit back at the end and then ended up in the 5th round. I know Ewers, obviously that didn't happen to him in college. He was just always the starter at Texas. I just think pre-draft process, we're probably going to see him and his value start to decline, maybe a 5th round pick. Somebody takes a flyer there. 211, we've got Ollie Gordon the second, third round capital to the Bears. Now, this is a very interesting landing spot because obviously they have Swift there, and Swift was pretty productive through the middle part of the year, but really at the beginning and the end of the year, he was not that good. So if they bring in Gordon in the third round, I think that's very interesting competition for Swift for the lead role there. And Gordon, he's an interesting case because if he had come out last year, he would have been the number 1 running back prospect. He would have been the first running back taken, probably over Jonathan Brooks, right? Him or Brooks would have been the first guy taken. Now, he has an abysmal season. I mean, he was so bad this year. And so now he went from this really thin running back class where he was the top prospect to this loaded running back class where he might not even be a third round pick, So I don't know. If he does go here, I'm a lot more encouraged by that. That means that they're going to take a shot on 2 seasons ago and on the fact that they still think he can be productive. But this is 100% going to be dependent on where he lands, because if he's a day 3 pick, I'm not going to be all that stoked on him.
He's going to have to test really well because this fall from grace has been something.
Yeah, it's crazy. I feel like you just don't see very many prospects go through where they're like literally the top prospect. Yeah. And then they fall all the way out of the top, like 10 almost, borderline top 10 at his position. Go and check out Gordon's or go and check out last year's like running back prospects. Gordon was at the top of all lists during this time last year. All right, last player, 212. We got Tez Johnson, round 3 to the Cowboys. Cowboys obviously need a compliment to CeeDee Lamb. I think this is a pretty good fit, faster player, and I think could be good in the offense.
I love Tez, man. I actually like him more than Isaiah Bond if he wasn't 160 pounds. I think that's just
That's
kind
the
of the
whole
issue.
problem.
That's
Yep.
the whole problem with Tez, man. He's a great player. He's electric. He reminds me so much of Garrett Wilson in the open field, just juking guys out with those sharp cuts. Like I really like this landing spot. But again, we saw last year with, the other kid from Oregon, what's his name? I'm already on the Broncos. Anyways, thin as a rail, who's also taller than Tez Johnson.
You forgot Troy Franklin's name?
Troy Franklin. Gosh, sorry. Bo Nix's other best. I think Tez Johnson and Bo Nix are brothers too. I think he's like not adopted, but like lived with the family for a while. Anyways.
Oh wow, that's cool. Cool story.
Yeah, I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's Tez. But yeah, no, I love Tez, man, and I think this would be an awesome fit.
Yeah, so Cowboys landing spot for receiver, another place where we're going to be focused on that spot because it's wide open, and one of these guys can be productive with that high flying offense. So love the landing spot. Tez Johnson as a player is great. He's just very undersized, so that's why his draft stock is going to be pushed down. But he was at Oregon. He was super productive. Go and check out his tape because it is very entertaining. The highlight reel is it's just crazy. It's just when he gets tackled, he gets jammed at the line of scrimmage. We saw Worthy struggle with that at the beginning of the year. Barely was involved in the offense because they were just jamming him. So until he can figure out how to get off the line of scrimmage, I think that's going to hold him back a little bit. But he can be very productive at the next level despite his size. All right, with that, thank you guys so much for watching. I know we went a little long on this one, but we had a lot of things that we wanted to get into. The landing spots for this one were so much better, so it was very, very entertaining to get into, and hopefully we will see you guys in the next one. Again, if you're still here, hit that subscribe button. Talk to you guys soon.
Later.